Sheikh Khalid, the powerful husband, Layla, the proud and calculating wife, and Maria, the devoted Filipina nanny. 3 lives bound together in a web of desire, betrayal, and vengeance. What began as a forbidden love affair inside a golden palace would soon spiral into a chilling story of secrets, obsession, and deadly revenge. In a world where wealth could hide almost anything, the truth was more dangerous than anyone imagined. In the glittering city of Dubai, Sheikh Khalid was admired by many as a man of wealth, authority, and charm. His mansion, a sprawling palace of white marble and golden chandeliers, was a symbol of power that people envied from afar. To outsiders, his life appeared perfect, untouched by pain or scandal. He was seen as the picture of success, with loyal followers, grand cars, and a respected name in the business world. Every detail of his public life painted him as a man who had everything anyone could desire. Yet behind the guarded gates of his estate, a different reality quietly existed, hidden from curious eyes. The Sheikh's world was not as flawless as it seemed. His marriage to Layla, though strong in the eyes of society, had grown cold within the walls of the palace. Their relationship, once filled with passion and companionship, had turned into a bond maintained for appearances rather than love. Layla, elegant and powerful in her own right, upheld the image of a devoted wife, but the emotional distance between them had created a silent void. Khalid felt that emptiness grow larger with each passing year, and though he lived surrounded by luxury, his heart longed for something more. Servants moved quietly through the house, never daring to disturb the fragile peace, yet they too sensed the tension between husband and wife. In the grand halls, where laughter should have echoed, silence reigned. Khalid, respected and feared in the city, carried within him a restless desire for warmth that his wealth could not buy. It was this longing, buried under layers of pride and secrecy, that would soon lead him into dangerous territory, setting in motion a chain of events that would destroy the illusion of perfection forever. When Maria arrived at the palace, she came with quiet grace and humble determination. She had traveled far from the Philippines, leaving behind her husband and children in hopes of providing them with a better life. The weight of her sacrifice was heavy, yet she carried it with dignity, hiding her sorrow behind a warm smile. To Layla, she seemed the perfect choice, a gentle and trustworthy nanny who would bring stability to the household. Maria quickly adapted to her new surroundings, caring for the Sheikh's children with patience and tenderness. The children grew attached to her, and soon she became an important presence in the vast home. Life in the palace was different from anything Maria had known. Every corner shimmered with wealth, yet she remained grounded, never allowing luxury to blind her to her true purpose. She sent money home regularly, cherishing the thought of her children's futures brightening with each sacrifice she made. Her dedication earned her the respect of the staff and the trust of Layla, who believed she had found someone loyal enough to ease her burdens. But it was Khalid who noticed her in a way that went beyond gratitude. At first, it was only in passing, her gentle laugh when the children played, the kindness in her eyes, the quiet resilience that stood out amid the palace's extravagance. He found himself drawn to her presence, lingering longer than necessary whenever she was nearby. For a man who lived in a world of power and appearances, Maria's simplicity was refreshing. What began as admiration soon settled into something far more dangerous. Though Maria tried to remain distant, the boundaries of employer and servant blurred under Khalid's growing attention. Unknowingly, she had stepped into a household where loyalty and temptation would clash, and her presence would change everything. Khalid's attraction to Maria deepened with each passing day, a slow-burning temptation that he could no longer ignore. What started as casual glances grew into stolen moments. He would find excuses to be near her, lingering in the nursery longer than necessary, watching her care for his children with a gentleness he had not seen in years. For Maria, the attention was unsettling. She had come to the palace to work, not to entangle herself in affairs that could ruin her family's future. Yet there was something magnetic about Khalid's gaze, a power in his presence that pulled her into a dangerous orbit. Late at night, when the palace grew quiet, the boundaries they had tried to uphold began to crumble. Hidden corners became their meeting places, where passion overtook reason. Khalid, intoxicated by the secrecy, believed he had discovered a love that revived him from the coldness of his marriage. For Maria, it was a storm of emotions, fear, guilt, and a thrill she struggled to resist. Each encounter tied her deeper into a web she knew could never end well. In the shadows of wealth and tradition, their affair unfolded with reckless abandon. Maria thought of her husband back home, of the vows she had once made, but Khalid's promises and attention clouded her judgment. She told herself it was temporary, a passing weakness, yet the truth was undeniable. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. What neither of them realized was that the palace, no matter how grand, could not conceal secrets forever. The walls seemed to watch, the servants whispered behind lowered eyes, and the air itself grew heavy with suspicion. Their forbidden connection, once thrilling, had become a ticking clock, counting down to inevitable disaster. Layla had always been a woman of sharp instincts, and she quickly sensed the subtle changes in her husband's behavior. Khalid, once distant but predictable, now carried a restlessness in his manner. His late-night walks through the palace grew more frequent, and his eyes seemed to follow the nanny more closely than before. Layla noticed the faintest details, traces of unfamiliar perfume on his clothes, the unusual hush that fell whenever Maria entered a room, and the fleeting moments of silence that spoke louder than words. Though no proof had yet surfaced, her intuition whispered that betrayal lingered in the air. Rather than confront her suspicions, Layla chose patience. She watched quietly, her elegant demeanor concealing the storm within. She became an observer in her own home, studying every movement, every glance exchanged between her husband and the nanny. The more she saw, the stronger her conviction grew. Behind her composed smile, anger began to build, sharp and dangerous. To the outside world, nothing appeared amiss. Layla maintained her role as the dignified wife, attending social gatherings and overseeing the household with poise. But in private, she pieced together fragments of evidence, subtle yet undeniable. The way Khalid lingered near the nursery, the sudden change in Maria's expressions when he appeared, and the quiet tension in the air all confirmed what Layla feared. The betrayal cut deeply, not only as a wound to her pride, but as a threat to the carefully crafted image she had worked so hard to protect. For Layla, marriage was more than love. It was power, position, and honor. To lose that to a servant was unthinkable. She vowed that before long, she would uncover the truth fully, and when she did, her response would be far more than simple anger. It would be vengeance. One evening, when the palace had settled into silence, Layla decided it was time to confirm what her instincts had long told her. She moved carefully, her footsteps echoing softly through the corridors as she followed Khalid. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and fury, each beat urging her forward. She had waited patiently, watching and gathering small signs, but now she wanted undeniable proof. When Khalid disappeared behind a locked door, her suspicion sharpened into certainty. She waited until he left, then used her influence to gain entry. Inside the room, Layla found the evidence she had feared yet expected. On a hidden shelf, carefully tucked away, lay handwritten notes in Maria's delicate script. They were letters filled with longing, words that revealed not only affection but a secret bond she could no longer deny. Among them were pieces of jewelry Layla had never seen before, gifts her husband had given to the nanny in acts of devotion. The scent of perfume clung faintly to the space, a mocking reminder of her husband's betrayal. As Layla stood in the room, her composure cracked beneath the weight of what she had uncovered. The betrayal was no longer suspicion, it was fact, carved into her heart with cruel precision. Every sacrifice she had made for her marriage, every effort to uphold her family's honor, felt like ashes in her hands. Khalid had not only betrayed her, but had done so with a woman she had welcomed into her home and trusted with her children. The pain transformed swiftly into a burning rage. To Layla, this was not just about love, but about power, respect, and dignity. She could not allow this humiliation to continue. From that moment, her sorrow hardened into resolve. She would not merely confront them. She would ensure that their betrayal carried a price neither would ever forget. Layla's fury did not erupt in chaos. Instead, it hardened into something far more dangerous, calculated control. She understood that acting impulsively would expose her pain and risk her reputation, And for a woman like her, image was everything. In the eyes of society, she was the Sheikh's loyal wife, a woman of grace and authority, and she would not allow scandal to strip that away. Divorce was not an option she considered. For Layla, betrayal demanded punishment, not separation. It had to be quiet, permanent, and unforgettable. She began to plan with meticulous care. Every detail was considered, from how she would lure Maria into vulnerability to how she would erase the evidence afterward. Layla masked her anger behind a facade of kindness, treating Maria with a warmth that seemed genuine. She offered small compliments, smiles, and gestures that hid the venom in her heart. To Khalid, she presented herself as calm and distant, concealing the knowledge she carried like a weapon waiting to be used. Days turned into weeks, and Layla sharpened her plan in silence. She studied Maria's routines, noting the times when she was most alone and unsuspecting. She rehearsed her every move in her mind, envisioning how she would strike without hesitation. In public, she remained untouchable, the dignified wife admired by all, but in private, her thoughts were consumed with vengeance. For Maria, unaware of the storm forming around her, life continued as usual. She cared for the children, exchanged hidden glances with Khalid, and believed her secret was safe. But Layla's eyes were always watching, her heart beating with dark anticipation. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back. Soon, the palace would no longer be a place of safety for Maria. It would become the stage for her final, tragic fate. The night Layla chose for her revenge was heavy with silence, broken only by the distant rumble of a storm rolling across the desert skies. The palace, usually bright with life, seemed darker than usual, its grand halls echoing with an unsettling stillness. Layla's plan, prepared in secret for weeks, was ready to unfold. With careful precision, she summoned Maria to a secluded wing of the estate under the pretense of needing assistance. Trusting and unsuspecting, Maria followed, unaware of the danger awaiting her. The air in the empty corridor felt suffocating as Layla led her deeper into the shadows. Once isolated from the rest of the household, the mask of kindness slipped away. What followed was not a burst of uncontrolled rage, but a chilling act carried out with cold determination. Layla struck swiftly, her anger guided by a desire not only to punish but to erase the betrayal entirely. Maria's final moments were filled with confusion and fear, her life ending in the very palace where she had once believed she had found purpose. When it was done, Layla stood over her, trembling not with regret, but with the overwhelming release of long-contained fury. The deed had been completed exactly as she envisioned. The humiliation she had endured was avenged, though at a cost that could never be undone. Later that night, Khalid discovered what had happened. The sight shattered him, the reality of Maria's lifeless body colliding with the weight of his own guilt. He had loved her in secret, and now that secret lay destroyed by the very woman he had once vowed to honor. The storm outside raged on, but it was nothing compared to the storm that had erupted within the palace walls, where passion, betrayal, and revenge had finally collided in blood. In the days that followed, Layla moved swiftly to bury the truth beneath layers of lies and influence. The palace, though shaken by what had occurred, was not a place where secrets easily escaped. Layla understood the power she held and used it without hesitation. Servants who knew too much were summoned and warned, their loyalty bought with money or secured through fear. Those who seemed unwilling to remain silent were quietly dismissed, never to return. The few who remained were bound by an unspoken understanding that the consequences of disobedience would be severe. An official story was carefully crafted and spread beyond the palace gates. It was whispered that Maria had suddenly returned to her homeland, called back to the Philippines by her family. Documents were arranged, her belongings packed and removed, her absence explained with the smoothness of a well-practiced lie. To outsiders, there was nothing unusual. Nannies came and went, and Maria's departure raised no suspicion. Within the palace, however, her disappearance lingered like a ghost, known but never spoken of. Khalid carried the heaviest burden of silence. He walked through his mansion as though haunted, every corner reminding him of the woman he had loved and the choices that had led to her fate. Guilt pressed against him like a weight he could never cast off. Yet, despite his torment, he said nothing. He knew that challenging Layla's version of events would only unleash more destruction. For Layla, the cover-up was a victory. She had not only erased Maria, but preserved her own power and dignity. The palace shone once again under her control, its reputation untarnished in the eyes of the world. But beneath its glittering surface, a darkness had taken root, a silence that whispered of betrayal, blood, and a crime hidden in plain sight. Years slipped by, yet the memory of what had happened never truly faded. The palace remained as magnificent as ever, its marble walls gleaming, its gardens meticulously kept, and its halls filled with the sound of wealth and power. To the outside world, Sheikh Khalid and Layla continued as the picture of prestige, their life seemingly untouched by scandal. But within the grand estate, shadows lingered. The truth of Maria's disappearance lived on, buried under silence, but never erased from the minds of those who had witnessed it. Khalid, though still respected and feared, carried the torment of guilt like a wound that refused to heal. He would sit alone in the quiet hours of the night, haunted by flashes of Maria's smile, by the memory of their stolen moments, and by the bitter knowledge that his desires had led her to her death. His wealth and status meant nothing in those moments. No amount of power could silence the voice of regret that whispered to him every time he walked past the places they had once shared. Layla, outwardly victorious, bore her own burden in silence. She had won, but victory came with a shadow that followed her every step. She had removed the threat to her pride and preserved her position, but the price was steep. The image she projected to the world, a woman of grace and control, masked the darker truth that lay beneath. She could never undo what she had done, and though she never spoke of it, the secret weighed heavily in her heart. Maria's name was never mentioned again, yet her absence was a presence in itself. The palace carried her ghost, invisible but powerful, a silent reminder that beneath wealth and beauty, betrayal and vengeance had left scars that time would never heal.